Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the AUC School of Continuing Education Community Lecture Series. I'm happy to see so many people here this evening in this beautiful hall, and I think we're going to have a very nice conversation amongst all of us. For those of you who don't know, I just want to give you a little bit of information, not too much, a little bit of information about the school and what we do and why we're having this lecture series. So the School of Continuing Education has existed for most of the life of the American University. Started in 1924, and the purpose of the school is to reach out to the broad swath of Egyptian society, for people to take classes in pretty much any topic that you could think of in one fashion or another: career development, languages, academic enrichment, lifelong learning. There's all sorts of things that we offer here in the Tahrir campus, in the New Cairo campus, around Egypt and beyond Egypt, really kind of cementing AUC's position as a global university here based in Cairo. So I think it's an important, it's an interesting, it's a fun mission. If you haven't taken one of our classes, you can find all kinds of material outside to figure out how to sign up and how to learn more about what we do. The idea of this lecture series is that we find people with big ideas and interesting backgrounds, and we set up a situation in which we can talk about those ideas and really have kind of a normal conversation, not an quote-unquote academic presentation, no PowerPoint, no heavy jargon about a specialized field. There's a place for that all the time, but we certainly don't need to do that here. This really is meant to be an interesting, engaging, and the kind of conversation that really connects beyond a specialized area. I want to thank the people at the School of Continuing Education who helped to organize this event, and they've worked very hard to do that. Also, for you to know, if you haven't been paying attention, the university has been really re-engaging this campus, known as the old campus here in Tahrir. There's a lot going on here through the Tahrir Cultural Center, so I really encourage you to look that up and come back regularly to this campus and really avail yourselves of all that's going on. Also here is a great bookstore down at the other end of the hall, and they're staying open later tonight, so if afterwards you want to go look through the offerings at AUC Press Bookstore, please do. And if you have any questions, ask me or anybody else after the event, and we can help you out with any of those things: the school, the bookstore, the cultural center, etc. Well, with all that having been said, I'd like to introduce our very distinguished guest tonight, and truly somebody who does not need a long introduction. I could give one because there is an extensive, really dramatically engaging biography, but I think it's going to come out in our conversation. So I don't really want to spoil the end of the story. I want to build up to it through our conversation. I will just say, and I think probably everybody in this room knows, co-founder, partner of Sawari Ventures, the czar of the Greek campus, the Flat Six Labs, which is how we first got to know each other, Nafham, and many, many, many other initiatives. And when this date became available for doing a lecture, I reached out to Ahmed and I said, would you be willing to do this and to kind of distill some lessons about the sorts of things you've learned over time by doing the many different kinds of work that you've done. And one of the things that really prompted it, and we were talking about this a few days ago, is that I've spent a lot of my life stuck in airports, spending way too much time between airplanes. And you go to the bookstore in an airport and you can find a big wall of books that is on leadership or success or something like that. And if you flip a little bit through those books, you quickly discover that it's all pretty formulaic, it's not that interesting, and they're trying to sell you something that says, oh, you know, it's all pretty easy. You just have to follow my recipe, 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z, and you'll be a great success. And, you know, life is more complicated than that. How we think about success is more complicated than that. And I recall going to a lecture, not even a lecture, a presentation by the New York businessman, then became New York mayor, and just recently became a candidate for president, Mike Bloomberg. And he spent the whole talk with a small group of us talking about his failures, about being fired from his first job, about not being that good when he was a university student, etc. And my favorite commercial, not that one has a favorite TV commercial, but is by the basketball star Michael Jordan. I see a lot of young people in the room, so you're post-Michael Jordan era. Just take my word for it. He was once the greatest basketball player on the face of the planet. And Nike, who I think is just brilliant at marketing, had an ad where he is recounting everything that he did wrong, that all the shots that he missed, all the games that he lost. And he says, over and over and over and again in my life, I have failed. And that is why I succeed. So I thought that might be a good starting point, Ahmed, to see, you know, how that kind of resonates with you, that sense of like you've got to, you know, succeeding is not necessarily easy, and you don't want to go out of your way and fail, but it's inevitable. We all make mistakes, we all fail, and so what do we do with that? When we're talking about success, we can't really talk about success. We can't talk about those great and grand life lessons if we're not also talking about the things that go wrong.
So, I think a lot of people talk about celebrating failure. I hate celebrating failure. Failure stinks, but it's one of the best ways to learn. And the only time really that I learn, at least in this stage of my life, is either I read something new, I fail, or I find somebody who completely disagrees with me. And by understanding their perspective, I learn something new. And by looking at our disagreement, not from trying to beat them up and convince them, but to actually examine the issue, am I wrong? Which side is correct? Is the way to learn. Maybe somebody brought a new perspective that I hadn't considered. So I remember almost all of my failures. I don't remember a lot of the things I did right, because those are the ones that stuck with me to not do it again, and to see and to dissect what went wrong and what I misjudged, and not to make that same mistake again.
And I think a fair number of people are so afraid of failing that they then are paralyzed. Better to not do anything, to just not try, than run the risk of failing. And so just kind of stick in place is safer than falling on your face.
Well, maybe that's a good analysis. If you really only remember your successes, it means you're not trying new things and taking a chance to make a mistake, and you're living off of, you know, all the past glory. It's actually the current glory or the current accomplishments or the next one. That's really what matters. One of my favorite quotes is from golf. The only thing that matters is the next shot, like life and golf, right? So focus on the next one. Whether you made a mistake or got it right, it doesn't matter. Focus on the next one.
You mentioned something else in passing when you were talking about this, and that what you've learned from people who you disagree with. And it seems to me that we live in a time worldwide where people are having a hard time figuring out how to have conversations with someone with whom you disagree. I know that in the US. I just moved here from New York 3 months ago. There's a massive problem because people are basically saying, if I don't agree with you, it's not just that I don't like your idea, but I'm going to take it a step further and I'm going to say, I don't like you. There's something about you because you have that idea, therefore I don't like. And I must by definition be a good person because I'm right. And so that makes it pretty hard to have a conversation, it seems, unless you're only talking to people you agree with.
And I mean, I go back to what I said just earlier, that it's an opportunity to really re-examine your position and to learn. But how you disagree with someone is also very important, because not damaging the relationship is important because it implies respect for the other person. Attaching them to their opinion in a permanent fashion is limiting for them as an individual. It limits your view of them. One of my best friends and I are 100% in opposition on our opinion, especially in US politics. And even till yesterday, he's defending Donald Trump's positions, which I just can't conceive of how he can logically make that rationale in his mind, even with his self-interest. And we're still friends. We still talk. We disagree about, politics and religion quite a bit, and it's easy to avoid the subject and just not talk about it. But it's better to engage respectfully, and I don't know, maybe you get to a point where you deadlock and really there's no additional data. I was telling one of my partners today, I'm willing to change my mind on any company or any investment we're looking at based on new data. I will switch 180 degrees on almost every opinion based on new data, as long as not something that's a moral, ethical decision.
And that takes a certain amount of humility to say, I'm willing to change my mind. I mean, you have to convince me, you have to bring data, but I'm still willing to change my mind. I mean, that's a certain kind of habit of thinking that you need to kind of get used to, I think, which is different than saying, I'm going to dig in my heels and this is who I am and this is what I think.
But maybe that's the root of the problem, is what I think is who I am.
Right.
And merging those two things is what makes people so stuck to their opinions, right? Separate yourself and your being, and if you really live the life, you know you're not in control, right? And you know that your opinions are not always right, because things are not going to go your way all the time. So having that flexibility, humility maybe, but some people think humility is the opposite of something, of being confident or whatever. It's actually understanding that you're not really in control, and a lot of things you shouldn't stress about. One of the best lessons I learned from my son, I was telling him, the economy in Egypt and the devaluation is, he says, let's just keep focusing. You used to tell me, only stress about the things you can control, right? Those are the only things really that you should stress about. If you can change it, okay, you should worry about it. Other than that, it's not up to you.
Yeah, well, that's a good lesson. And it's, to be in the position to be able to learn from one's children also takes a certain amount of confidence, I would say. Not just humility, but confidence to say, I'll learn from all sources. Well, let's go back a little bit and talk about work and how one learns about work. I have yet one more Michael Jordan example. I'm not obsessed with him too much, just a little bit. He was once saying, maybe I made it, maybe it's my fault. Maybe I made it look too easy. Maybe I made success look too easy, so people didn't think I had to work, or people don't think one has to work to be successful. And it's not talent. Talent, in a way, is almost a cop-out. Because if you say, oh, someone is talented in this area, you're saying, I'm not really, so I don't have to work. Most people who you would think are talented are actually just really working incredibly hard. So, as a young person, how did you go about just kind of learning the habits of how you work, like how you make it happen, how you make things happen?
It was actually funny. When I was 16, my father took me over to Uncle Abed's gas station in Los Angeles, and he said, "You're going to work here this summer." And I said, "Okay, how much am I getting paid?" He said, "You're not. You're getting a sandwich and a Coke for lunch. You're here to learn how to work, not to get paid." Okay. And it was interesting, but I think just one aside story, because I always thank him for it, is I learned my first business lesson at the gas station, because he told me, he said, "You pump the gas, you collect the money, but more important, you wash the windows and do that very well." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because what the customer sees every day is how he remembers you. And if the customer sees a clean window, that's how he remembers you." My first business lesson, right, when I was 16. So it was an interesting experience, and it taught me to try to extract a lesson from every job. My second job, because you mentioned about getting fired, I got fired from my second job. And it was because it was being a bit irresponsible, and I kind of learned the boundaries. It was lovely summer. It was another summer job, and it was a lovely summer day, and I was going to the beach, but I didn't have any money, so I called in sick, but I went to the office, to the company, to pick up my paycheck so I could have money to go to the beach. And so that didn't go so well with my boss. "You're supposed to be sick, not here, pick up your paycheck." And I didn't put those two together. So that was at 17. So I think maybe the lesson is, for those of you who have kids or will have kids, put them to work early. Let them learn what is work, what the ethic of work. Something I see very missing in Egypt is the pride in the product of your work. There's no shame in work. There's shame in doing lousy work, right? The ethics of work is something that really, really needs a focus for everybody. There's remnants of some bad cultural habits that we have here, and we need to hopefully over the next generation or two get rid of them, right? The conscientious work, not the work I can get away with and get paid for.
You know, I have a friend who's very successful, and he hires and sometimes fires people all the time. And he says he often asks people in interviews, "So tell me about some work that you've done that's not on your resume, not on this sterling resume where you've gone to several Ivy League schools and you've interned at Goldman Sachs and you've done this and you've done that. You know, did you ever work in your uncle's gas station? Were you ever a waiter or a waitress? Did you ever chop down trees?" or whatever it is that you might have done as a young person to really learn that lesson. And he said it's not a litmus test. He doesn't cut people off. But if they have done those things, he's much more likely to know that they know how to work, that they've already learned those lessons. So I think that, you know, your father gave you a great gift by saying you're going to work for your uncle this summer.
I worked at a gas station. I worked in a call center. I worked as a referee in organizing kids' summer leagues. I worked at an amusement park. I had some great, great work experiences growing up. All this was till I finished college. I worked in a hospital. So great, different, varied experiences, which really expanded my thinking and allowed me to look at things in very different ways and different perspective. I think had I gone to work in a single line of business, I might have been very good at it. Okay, but I don't think I would have been able to see in a kind of creative, analytical way that I tend to enjoy looking at different things.
So that's a perfect segue to this, one of the things I really wanted to touch on in this conversation that you've been so good at for so long. And I think people who do what you do have to bring these two things together. And you just said analytical, but creative. That, you know, you're not looking at things like a machine, not a robot, but you're also not just looking at it like an artist, but you're somehow bringing those two what seem to be separate things, but may not be. You're bringing them together with purpose.
I think one is, maybe I attribute it to something my dad taught me when I was very little, is every time you look at something, ask why. And when you come up with the answer, ask why. And when you come up with the third answer, ask why. 3 times, 3 levels deep. And it's something he learned from one of his professors at university here. He says, after you, this was an exercise we used to do, and he'd ask me about different things. And after a while, it became automatic that I would analyze something to the nth degree immediately as I thought about it. And that opened up all the possibilities, because there were 3 different possibilities. And the idea of coming up with a creative solution, I think, is more that I don't really care what people think if I mess up, right? So I can take a chance on do this and do that, and all right. The only time I really stress is when I'm investing my money and other people's money. I worry about that responsibility. It's the only time that I really become conservative in my approach to a problem or to a project. If I'm doing it and just spending our money, because my true boss is here, so well, when I'm spending our money, then it's okay. You're willing to take risk, and having a wonderful partner who supports you in taking risk. Actually, the only person in the whole country who thought I wasn't crazy to do the Greek campus project was my wife. Every other person I knew said, "You're crazy. You're going to do a project here? In 2013? There's tear gas." There was tear gas. We had to close the campus and run to the other side of the campus the first 2 days we took over the campus. But the only person that said it's a good project. So having somebody supportive also is very good, and allows you to be creative, sometimes too creative or too risk-taking, but that's also a big factor in life. Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook actually said a very, very important thing. Said the biggest career choice that most people make is the person they marry, because it limits or expands their career choices. So it was a very, very astute thing, and I think I never thought of it that way until 3 years ago or 4 years ago when I first read that. And I'm always interested by new paradigms that people pose that I haven't thought of, because I've tried to think of so many different things. I enjoy the intellectual challenge of somebody posing a new question.
Yeah, no, that is very interesting, that kind of marriage choice as a key life choice. I mean, we all hear that in sort of a platitude, but to put it in the way that you did.
As a career choice.
As a career choice.
It will enhance or limit your career opportunities.
So have somebody in your corner who's going to support you, but also someone, thinking about my own wife, who will, when needed, hopefully behind closed doors, be brutally honest and say, you know what, this is a terrible idea, or whatever.
And with a complementary skill set.
Yeah.
Okay, not a replication skill set, a complementary skill set.
Yeah. Well, then, and so that also leads me to the idea of mentors. You read over and over again that, we all need good mentors, and for sure that's true, and that's been true in my life. And I don't know if there's like a formula on how one does that, or if it's just luck or whatever, but when I think about the things that I've done without the mentors that I've had, just simply would not have been possible. Not only because they kind of help you, and sure, they can help a bit with wasta or something like that, but I really mean that they change your way of thinking. They open a new set of possibilities.
So one of the most important things with, at least I look at it, finding mentors for our companies is it has to be a match. There has to be somebody will mentor and give you advice for 5 minutes, or listen to your problem for 5-10 minutes and give you advice, and that's it. But for somebody to engage their inside with your issues on an ongoing relationship, there has to be a one-to-one personal relationship. And if you think that somebody's a mentor, ask them to be a mentor. And if they're honest about it, they'll tell you. I hate when people come up to me and give me their business plan in the middle of a hallway in a conference, because, like I say, I would be doing you an injustice to give you an opinion based on 1.5 minutes of your time. So I'm not going to solve the problem right, and I'm going to give you bad advice. On the flip side, I actually take the advice I give very seriously as a responsibility, because one of my daughter's friends asked me a question, said, so should I do this or do this? And I said, you should move to Dubai. She was in Los Angeles, and she moved to Dubai. And a year later, she called and said, yeah, Uncle Ahmed, I moved to Dubai based on your advice. I said, oh my God, okay? It scared the hell out of me, the responsibility that I impacted somebody's life that much with just some advice, that I really started to take it very seriously. And I try never to give advice frivolously to people and make choices for them. And I try never to tell people, you should do this. The only advice I try to ever give is, if I was in your situation, had this problem, I would do X. You do whatever you want and what you think is right, but I don't say you should do that. And I would actually like to say, I've had several mentors in my life, and several people who helped me for expecting zero in return. And to this day, every year, 2 years, I call them and say thank you, just randomly. I have had people who, 75-year-old men, cry because I called them and said thank you. Because I said thank you because I remember when you did this and this and this and helped me. Okay? And it's probably the most wonderful thing that you can do for the person who helped you and for yourself. Because having that sense of gratitude that I didn't get here on my own, that I got here because I'm blessed, because that my life intersected that person, is an amazing experience for your heart, for my heart, when I do that and when I called him. One of those calls was to Uncle Abed, who gave me my first job. And another one was to the guy who actually, when my first real job in a Wall Street company, they stuck me in the marketing department. They said, you speak Arabic, call all the guys who speak Arabic, in the Middle East who have money. And this guy said, after a couple of weeks, said, this guy's smart. Come here, I'm gonna move you to this department, and I'm gonna mentor you, and I'm gonna, teach you the business. That guy changed my life. He changed my life, right? For nothing. He didn't, there was no benefit to him directly, just went out of his way to help me. And so being thankful for those things is good for you and for the person, because what I realized is it validates for that person their life and the good things they've done, and gives them a wonderful sense of worth. Okay, we all need a sense of self-worth at some point. Somebody or somehow to feel that we've contributed something positive in the world above the things that we currently touch and feel and think about.
But having a mentor and having that really work, that fit, that match that you're talking about, I think also requires that you, as the person who is being guided by the mentor, that you're willing to listen. I mean, like really seriously listen. And back to my wife, too bad she's not here to hear me praising her left and right in public.
There's video.
Good. Well, send this video to her. She, who used to be a journalist, said that listening really is a lost art, and that spending time in Washington, D.C. or in Manhattan, you can kind of get the sense that everybody is just having individual speeches. And somebody gives a speech, and when they're done giving a speech, somebody else gives a speech, and they're not really back to this idea of talking to each other, etc. But the art of listening and the power of listening, I think, is something really valuable that may be sort of fading away. I hope not. This room is listening, so that's good.
Well, that kind of loops back to the part about disagreement. If you're not listening, you'll never know what the other person is really saying. And the summation of the conversation is really simple. Listening doesn't mean waiting to talk. And that's what most people do. They're not really listening. They're just waiting to tell you, to talk, to say what they have to say, and that way they feel good about themselves. Going back, the most amazing person, again, that was my father. Allah yarhamhu, he passed away a couple years ago, but I was sitting with my sisters and the 11 grandchildren and their spouses, and nobody remembered one instance in his life where he ever interrupted somebody. Never interrupted somebody who spoke. And several of the generation, my sisters and our kids, have learned that skill of making the person in front of them feel like they're the most important thing in the conversation is when they're talking. And my dad actually took it a step higher. He didn't make you feel you're the most important thing. He made you feel like what you're saying is the most important thing in the world. And he was so focused on what the output of the person as important and as a validation of a human being in front of them, that it was the ultimate in respect of a fellow human being.
Yeah, I think people's stories are fascinating. And I think if your starting point is that you like people and you want to get to know their stories and you value them, their humanity, that's an important beginning point. But I think it does kind of require in our age of endless distractions to kind of turn off the noise a little bit and just focus on who's talking to you and listen to it and then respond to that, as opposed to, as you say, waiting to speak in the speech that you're about to give.
May I say?
Yeah.
I just want to add, these are things I aspire to, not I excel at. Okay? So listening to somebody fully is something I aspire to and I consciously try to do. Don't succeed all the time, but it's a step on the way up that, hopefully as I get better, I'll be able to do it more fully.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these things are aspirations, but you can learn it. I mean, you can teach yourself, you can learn from others how to do a lot of these things, how to make them kind of a habit, how to reprogram yourself so that you're able to do that and get closer to those aspirational goals. And as you get more advanced in one's career, no matter what you're doing, I think you're going to find yourself inevitably in some kind of leadership position. No matter what it is. It's a company, it's a local organization that you're involved in, it's a informal group of people, whatever. At a certain point, people are going to turn to you as the leader. And that can be a bit jarring, I think, when it happens suddenly. I mean, I remember going from having really one person working for me part-time to taking over an organization that had many, many, many employees around the world. And it really, I tried not to let it be too daunting publicly, but inside I was really it was a big step. And I had a lot of lessons to learn, and I made a lot of mistakes. But again, back to that bookshelf in the airport and leadership, what do you think you've learned in doing this over some years?
There was a little bookshelf in my dad's closet after he passed away. He pulled out the little notebook, and he actually had a little note. He had a little notebook about leadership, and his first note was, "Leaders have to deserve the people they lead." And that was his way of saying you have to be at your highest or best self in order to be able to lead these people. I think one of the biggest things is giving people space and accountability. So it's kind of a balance, and maybe sometimes it goes too far one way or too far the other way, but as long as you don't stay on one side too far.
Space and accountability.
Right. So you give them accountability, and you can, demand and be very aggressive about the accountability, but you can't be that way all the time. There has to be times when there's space, and you have to let them go out and explore and make mistakes, and then bring it back the other way. And hopefully, after a while, the boundaries you set can expand, right? And you don't have to make the accountability here, and you don't have to make the freedom here. You can actually widen it really wide, and then they never get to either end, right? They don't get over creative and go crazy,
Right.
And they don't really mess up, and you have to sit down and, go over the accountability part again. So somewhere in that balance. And the other thing is, you have, at some level, they have to be individuals, not just teams. People don't like to be teams all the time, okay? People like to be individuals. They have to work in teams, but you have to lead them as individuals.
Yeah. That makes a great deal of sense, and that gets back to my my sports analogies as well. So Michael Jordan would like that, I think. The last thing I want to touch on before we open it up to the floor for joining the conversation is another balance to strike, and that is about tradition, whether tradition we might think of it in society, or we might just think somebody saying, well, this is the way we've always done something in an organization, whatever, that there's a certain way that one must do things, and finding that balance between respecting a tradition, respecting a way of doing things within an organization, but also knowing when to do something different, to break the mold and try something new.
Well, maybe that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is the idea of being creative. You really can't be creative if you're bound by too many traditions. You can be bound by, if you put together ethics, morality, and traditions, okay, I can see how those are boundaries, and those are boundaries you should respect. When people have their own traditions, you should respect those as well, or I respect those as well. See, I correct myself when I say you should. I try to catch myself all the time, even when I'm talking to audiences. I try not to say should. Have those boundaries, and I try to be respectful of their traditions, but maybe the one thing I would say to the young people here, if you follow a lot of traditions and you don't know the logic behind them, right? You should know the logic. You should know the reason you're following a tradition. What is the purpose? Is it beneficial? Be respectful of people's traditions, but following other people's traditions or traditions that you don't understand, that's, as I call it, peer pressure from the dead people, right? So understand, absorb, digest, accept, and practice. Don't be peer pressured into doing something that makes no sense to you whatsoever.
And ask why 3 times.
That's how I get to the answers, right? Yeah. Just keep asking why. Why am I doing this? Why do I do this? Is this good for me? Is this good for those around me? Is it good for the world? My job is to do things that are good. What's my definition of good? That's something you have to figure out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, speaking of asking and asking why, so why don't we open up the floor. We have a couple of microphones that can be handed around when you want to ask a question. Please use the microphone so everybody can hear you. Please, no long speeches, just an actual question that ends in a question mark would be a good start. So who would like to start us off and join the conversation with us? Down here.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Well, I'm trying to start a new business here in Egypt. And I was working before in Dubai also, and I'm trying to transfer this business from Dubai to Egypt. But I will start it here. So started doing my homework, started with the business plan and the customer interviews and all of that. But I don't know, I found it a little bit hard to start something new, as you were speaking about the traditions. So what I need to do is to break the traditions within the companies and start something new, which is outsourcing.
Could you turn the volume just a little bit? وطي صوت سنة بتاع الميكروفون. شكرا.
Thank you. No problem, it's okay. So I started with my friends and I started asking about the people who I'm targeting. And the first one I started to speak with, he started, breaking down everything for me. I started thinking that my idea was not going to work here. And also I assigned one of my friends, another friend who was working with me in Dubai, and he came back here to Egypt, and I assigned him as to be the CSO, to start putting the presentations and all of that. And once he started talking to this person also, the target customer, he started, like getting back. Start to back off. I don't know.
I don't want to be rude, but I just want to tell you.
Sure.
What I said earlier is I can't give you an opinion on your business, but if you want to ask me a generic question about Egypt or about a particular type of business, I'm happy to give you an opinion and a response. But I can't respond about your particular business unless it's a question that's on all businesses, okay?
Sure, I'm coming to the question.
Hold the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. I'm coming to my question, but I'm just asking about, I'm discussing the whole thing so you can have an idea about what I'm trying to ask. My question is, what do you do in beginning or starting a new business, which is newly introduced to Egypt or to this backgrounds, and if you was, you was faced with rejections at the beginning, how do you deal with rejections at the beginning? That's my
Just in
question.
case anybody didn't hear the essence of this, the excellent question at the end, how do you deal with rejection? Sort of a version of how do you deal with failure, but I think rejection can even be more personal in a way.
Okay. And by the way, there's a lady behind the pole in the back there who had her hand up. I'm sure you're never going to see her, but she was in the back corner there when we get around. So the rejection, go back to the kind of maybe the same thought of the disagreement, right? The people rejecting you might be right? You might have a brilliant idea that works in Thailand, it just doesn't work in Egypt. One of the greatest underestimated factors in the success of businesses is timing. I have lost more money on companies that were too early. Maybe because I see things a little bit farther up and I invest early and the customers aren't ready or the market's not ready. I rarely invest too late in ideas. I usually invest too early in ideas and they don't happen for a year after the money runs out or 10 years after. I had a great idea in 1998 that was just 10 years too early and lost a lot of money on it. It was a brilliant company, would have been $1 billion company if it could have lived for 10 years. Right? So the honesty in evaluating the feedback, is it rejection because I failed to educate or explain the business case properly to the person? Did I convey the business case properly to them and they reject it because they think it's a dumb idea or because it's a product they don't want to use? Those are all different things that have to be taken into account. But at some point, we're not going to change the market. One might be able to educate the consumers, but I'm not going to change their behavior patterns. I'm going to educate them. Maybe this is a new product. It's good for you. Here's a compelling argument. That's still not good enough, right? Okay, then maybe it's just not a good fit for this market. So not every good idea done in a different market can be copy-paste to a different country. Not every idea, they used to say the slogan, copy, paste, innovate. Even that doesn't work all the time, right? So you can copy, paste, and localize. That doesn't work all the time. It works some of the time, works a lot of the time, right? There is probably an essence of a new idea within that new idea that will work. Maybe not the whole package as I have structured it in my mind and the way I want to present it to the marketplace.
I think so. We had somebody way in the back. I know it takes a little while to get back there, but we don't want to neglect the people who happen to be sitting behind the pole.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So I have two questions on two areas that I think are of great potential for startups and young entrepreneurs. This is specific to Egypt and the Middle East. So first of all, healthcare systems, we're seeing finally automation is coming to these areas. However, my concern is the structure and the way that the governments are approaching the automation will only allow the opportunity to large players. So what do you think are good break points for the startups to actually contribute to the healthcare automation in the Middle East? Actually, a similar question about the FinTech. In this case, however, I'm concerned and impressed with the amount of investment that's going into incubators about the subject, and really frustrated with the
I'm sorry, you said FinTech?
Yes.
Okay.
Really frustrated with the lack of creativity. Most of the startups that I'm seeing are actually very derivative, and real contributions are again supported by the government and the big players. So what are again good breakpoints for young investors into FinTech? Thank you.
Never call on somebody behind a pole. They have difficult questions. Okay. No, so on the healthcare question, healthcare is a very broad-based business, and you have to have harmonization on the services. So it's very difficult in any country for small companies to really penetrate the healthcare market. They can have niches in other countries. I don't think that there will be room for a lot of healthcare companies that are not on scale. And I think a lot of investors see the same thing, which is why you see big groups buying hospitals and making big scale investments. It is because they understand that any program and any true advancement to be relevant in Egypt will have to be introduced on scale, not introduced in this hospital in Shubra, right? It'll have to be across the country, or across a certain standard, or across all the A-tier hospitals and then the B-tier hospitals. So I don't see a lot of room for startup innovation, except in small niches. So none of my answers are absolutes, right? But on a macro trend, no, the macro trend is against small startups in those niches in healthcare. In FinTech, on the other hand, the private sector and the startups provide most services faster and cheaper than the banks, because the banks are saddled with large infrastructure and regulatory burdens. The regulatory burdens that they have are complemented with regulatory protections, so that you can't compete with them in certain areas. So I think there's a lot of room in FinTech for startups. And the reason is, not everybody has to have the same payment system. Not everybody has to participate in this software that does an online jam'iyya, or not everybody has to. The back-end infrastructure, the guys who do the clearing and the networks, that'll probably be more harmonized across the country. But there will be very many small niches where people will be able to play, and because everybody's going to want to connect with everybody else. In healthcare, when you have 1, 2, 3, 5 payers, you're going to have a lot of providers, but you're not going to have systems across the board that somebody doesn't mandate.
Yes.
So
We're going over here first.
thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Talking about timing, which is very important, as you said, throughout your life, and throughout your life, which is inspiration to more of us, have you been taking steps as planned, or have it been spontaneous? So do you recommend that we have a plan of everything, and we do like continuous evaluation of every year, of every 5-year plan, or shall we make it spontaneous better?
So you're asking about my experience, not what I recommend.
Yes. Your experience.
My experience?
And what do you recommend?
No, what I recommend is actually much easier. I recommend to do the thing that suits your personality better, okay? And I'm not the kind of schemer who can sit here and plan his life 5, 10 years in advance, right? I don't have that wiring, because I will re-examine every decision every day. So I plan macro trends and directions, but I don't plan a lot of steps. Other people very close to me, from people I work with to family members, they know where they're going on vacation in June 2021, right? My life, our life doesn't work that way very well, right? So that's we reassess on a regular basis because different opportunities arise and different potential better outcomes or experiences become available.
So from your experience, it has been spontaneous about startup, a business or something?
Oh, spontaneous, I mean, if I come up with an idea and it takes 6 months or a year to implement, right? I guess that's spontaneous because I came up with the idea and started working on it 2 months later, right? I mean, the Greek campus was an idea that came up in February. It took 19 months to negotiate the deal. Okay, and we had 4 different governments here while we were doing that. So I think every day is spontaneous because like the world changes. So whatever plan you have, throw it out the window, right? So it's very difficult to plan that far in advance, and if you stick to that plan, I don't know that that's probably the best thing. I think if you're going to develop a product or a chip, and you make a plan of how to develop that over 5 years, and it has 100 steps, and you know the 100 steps, that's a logical thing to do, right? You don't do a chip design development spontaneously like I make decisions on investments or in businesses. But the macro trend is in the same direction.
I have to say, I'm always a little worried when I would be advising undergraduate students, or somebody who's 20 or 21 years old, and they come to my office and then they have a highly elaborated, multi-year, maybe decade-long plan of what they're going to do. And it can sound really very impressive. But what I say to them is, that's all well and good, and if that fits your personality and that's what you want to do, then I'm here to help you figure out the steps to take to do that. But you also need to understand that there, as economists say, there's an opportunity cost to having such a rigid plan. You're going to miss the opportunity to improvise, to play some jazz, to make it work in a way that you hadn't imagined when you sat there as a 21-year-old and came up with that plan. And so your plan may in fact work out just as you had said it, but you may have missed lots of other business, career, marriage, whatever opportunities because it didn't fit into that conception you had of yourself and of the world at a pretty young age.
I'm Yusuf. Thank you for being here this evening. I want to ask you a little bit a personal question. Throughout our lives, we all have challenges and some struggles, and also we have targets and goals, and we are all motivated, sometimes internal and external motivation. But at some points, we should hold for something or look for something to let us keep going. What was this thing for you? Did you have some target to achieve, or you wanted to prove to yourself that you deserve something, or whatever? What is it? Thank you.
Interesting question. So when I was younger, I was driven by the desire to not fail more, okay? And it was like somebody who's angry and really wants to prove themselves and driven by that, that fire inside, and you really want to prove, and, I want to do well, and I want to excel, and I want to beat everybody, and kind of through the transition of life, motivated by different things. The kind of in the low points, I will tell you the thing that magnifies the low points and makes them lower, for me has been my ego, and I think that's actually for everybody. Because your ego makes your expectations and your reality not meet. Okay? And how can this happen to me? I should be here, blah, 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 right? And your ego makes you depressed even more. Right? And when you get rid of that and say, it happened, I'm not really in control, the down comes back up very quickly. By the way, on the flip side, ego has destroyed more startups than I've ever seen, because the CEO says, I'm hot stuff, I don't need to listen to anybody, I'm doing well, I made money, I just raised a round, blah, 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 right? And crash the company immediately. So your ego tends to magnify on the upside and make you think you're really hot stuff, right? When you're really not that great. And on the downside, it makes you feel worse, and it magnifies on the downside when you're really not that bad. So keeping that kind of in check is a very important thing to living a happier life.
Thank you so much.
Why don't we go right here? So there we go. Yes, sir.
Yes. Due to the IT sector which I belong to, we need your advice how to see a startup on the way like Google, in the way like Google, Microsoft, WhatsApp, Uber, how we can see startup in this
Here
line?
in Egypt?
Yes, sure.
There are many different types of companies that succeed and make money. Some are software and consumer. I would say the biggest disadvantage that we have in Egypt is, and actually the rest of the world, is very few countries other than the US have been successful at making global products. Even China, that has products that have 1 billion customers, is mostly just China. So there is a bias, and kind of it's a, anything from the US has to be better than anywhere else, whereas there are many products that started somewhere else that could be better than those that came out of the US. So that mindset has to break first before we actually see those type of massive companies from Egypt. On the other side, there are people here who are really, really smart and creating some great products and technology and good researchers, and turning that into a product that can be sold internationally is a big, difficult step, and very few people in Egypt know how to do that. So we need to find and train people how to productize technology to take it globally. So I think we will see in the next 2-3 years a few companies that are over $1 billion that have started and come out of Egypt.
Let's say a mutual friend of ours, Elmira Bayrasli, wrote a book about just this topic. And the point of the book is that the next, whoever you wanted to name, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever, is not going to come from California or New York, but they're going to be somewhere else in the world. And Elmira was here in Cairo and met with people and said that it could very well be here, but taking those steps is what you're talking about. But it's highly recommend the book. I think it's well worth reading, and she's a very dynamic person, very out there a lot in the media, well worth engaging on a wide variety of topics.
Sorry, and she was right, because the next one that came out is Jack Ma.
Yeah.
It came out of China, right? So Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg, Jack Ma.
Absolutely. So where did the microphone go? Oh, sir, yes.
Excuse me. My name is Habashi Muhammad. I am my job teacher, Arabic language. Excuse me if you have speak English mix in Arabic here, if some words not remember. What do you think about in the continuous education? What did about in world? In continuous education, a lot of people learning, getting career, nothing, and some people not have money to study in continuous education. Other people, but I want after finish the student. A change in somebody, in other body, not like in somebody different, black, white, and change about in this education. Yes, excuse me. And you must in family, in all home, a change in children, how to mix in other different in pupils in school and the information. Excuse me.
So continuing education, I'll answer kind of for both uses of the word. The continuing education, like the school, this continuing education, I think is very useful because it's selected by the person what they want to study. Continuous education through an academic career to just collect certificates is probably not the best way. The smartest people I've met in Egypt and entrepreneurs are people who have continuous education and self-educate and go online and get educated and worry less about going through a formal curriculum and would go select courses online, select courses at a school of continuing education rather than working for certificates. Okay. Your other question about the homes and what needs to change, I actually think the fundamental change that is needed in Egypt is the concept of personal accountability. The individual, the one. Even the way we raise the kids here, right? A kid knocks a glass off the table, not you knocked the glass off the table. There's no concept of personal accountability. How many times you see a kid walk and hit his leg on the table and the dad says, the table hit Muhammad, right? No, you idiot, Muhammad hit the table. Muhammad was wrong, he made the mistake. That leads to the guy walking off the street not looking because I'm responsible to not hit him, right? So it's one of my favorite things that drives me, or the most important thing that drives me crazy in Egypt is personal accountability. Nobody's responsible. I have almost fired somebody for using the word ta'riban. All right? I said, there's no ta'riban, the hell with ta'riban. There's approximately. There's yes, no, and I don't know. Those three answers are acceptable. Right? Ta'riban is a way to be a coward and not take a stand on the answer to a simple, stupid question as the beginning of the whole chain of kind of weakness of character. Right? If you don't have a strong enough character to actually answer a question, like a human being who's responsible for the answer, how the hell can you be responsible for your life? Everything's somebody else's problem. How many employees do you have? You say, would you do this, please? Okay. The next day, did you do this? No, but I told Muhammad to do it. What the heck was that? That's not part of the equation. I asked you to do it, you do it. The response isn't, I didn't hand it to somebody, right? So personal accountability is the number one thing that I think we need to change in this country to improve families, to improve society, to improve everything. Everybody be responsible for themselves, not for everybody else. Everybody's great at dissecting what everybody else does wrong, but not what they did wrong. Nobody says, sorry, I messed up. Nobody. It was Muhammad's fault because I gave it to him and he didn't do it. Ta'riban, this didn't happen. So, personal responsibility, number one problem here that we need to fix in families and in the workplace.
We really have to move on.
You hit one of my favorite subjects, which really bothers me the most.
Yeah, you already had a great question, so let's go out on top. But let's maybe go over to this side of the room because I don't want to ignore the people over here. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. The session is called The Life of an Entrepreneur. And we wish you a long life of entrepreneurship. So we consider if you're halfway through, what are the three lessons, the three generic things you'd like to tell yourself that to continue the other half of your entrepreneurial life and to be of use to the audience you would like to ask. This is the first question. It's a generic one.
Okay.
To the second, or I wait for...
Please go ahead.
The second is specific. If you have a startup and you have two financing opportunities, one of them is to self-finance. You have the means to finance beyond the seed. There is a project, there is already your post-seed, you have a product, and the timing looks to be very good because people are adopting it. And you need to move to next step. So would you self-finance, or would you get with you, although you have the means, somebody to finance at this level, to get that mentorship, to get that other critical eye with somebody who has more of a stakeholder than a personal help?
Okay, so can I answer your second question first?
As you wish.
The second question actually is, you gave a question that was fairly straightforward and then you made it very complicated. Okay, which is, it's always easier to self-finance because going back to my earlier comment, I feel very guilty with other people's money. right? And I take it much more seriously. And if I can self-finance, I don't have to give away equity. But then you add it on layers upon layers upon layers, which is mentorship and all the things and the critical eye. If I don't have those things and I feel I need them, then I would trade off self-financing for bringing in a professional investor, a professional consultant from the outside. So the first part was a very straightforward, I would always self-finance if I can. However, if it's crucial for the company to get outside help, I would definitely do that. Because, falling in love with our own ideas is one of the real big risk factors, and it's always good to have feedback or even a market audit, because the fact that it can be funded from someone else is a market audit. The 3 lessons that I learned, boy, there's a lot more than 3 lessons because I made lots of mistakes and learned from lots of them. So can you help me? Pick a very specific topic, because usually like 3 life lessons, that's a very broad topic. Happy to give you an opinion on most topics, just pick something a little more narrow. Religion, God, the easy ones, right? Politics, China.
I assume, I'm just trying to help with the idea that the topic is the life of entrepreneur. I understand that most of the people who came with an interest of being an entrepreneurs, they want to have a higher rate or possibility of success, so what are things that we should make sure that we don't do, or I don't know.
Don't be an entrepreneur. Don't be an entrepreneur. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I don't ever recommend for anyone to be an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur is like being a painter. If you don't love it and feel it and really want to do it, please don't do it because it's cool, because somebody says it's a good idea, because this guy will think I'm cool, or this girl will think I'm cool, or because it's chic, or that's what some professor told me I should do, right? Be an entrepreneur because this is what you really care about, this is what you want to do, and this is what you're willing to commit a substantial part of your life to. And if you go down this road and you're a painter and you didn't sell anything after 3 years, but you loved the painting and you look back on your life and the road you've walked and it's okay, and you're happy with that, then you should be an entrepreneur, right? So I don't recommend to anybody to be an entrepreneur. It's a hard job. It's a difficult life, right? You don't get to go to the beach. You don't get to go have shisha with your friends, right? You got to work, right? Or else you're not really an entrepreneur. You're kind of a pretender and you fail very quickly, right? Or you keep a company on life support for a year, spending 10,000 pounds a month and having one employee, coffee boy, and you go to the office and pretend you're an entrepreneur. If you're really going to be an entrepreneur and build a company, that is so damn hard, right? So be really serious about it, be really passionate about it.
Thank you.
Great. All right, we have time for just a couple of more. Yes, please.
Okay, it's not really a question. I don't know, I'll try to phrase it as a question. It's about women in business. And it's actually quite related to what you've just previously have said.
Okay.
Just like the last question. VC funding, even in the Netherlands, only 1.6% of VC funding goes to women. I don't know about Egypt, I don't know about the statistics in Egypt, but not only women, social entrepreneurs, creative entrepreneurs, all these type of people that are not the people you've just mentioned, like the ones who are working 24/7, who are giving up everything else for building a company, who are just after the money, who are just after the profit, who are following the capitalistic, the successful model that already exists, and we know it already exists, and we're all following it. Shouldn't we have an investment, specifically designed investment schemes for, let's say, different people? Or should we all, it's a one model that fits all, that we all have to follow, or else we're not good enough or we're not successful? And I want to hear your opinion about that.
Okay.
I want some investment schemes that are designed for people who are not going to work for 24/7.
So you have as usual, 3-4 questions in there. I know you.
لا والله هو واحد.
Okay.
Give me your opinion about women in business in Egypt.
Thank you. I'll stop. That's a question.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to.
No, that's not my question.
Thank you. Okay, that's one. All right.
Accessing finance.
Okay, that's 2. Accessing finance for women
in business, accessing finance in Egypt, and if it's a good percentage of or not. You know, like a third of Egyptian households are only run by women. Most of Egyptian income earned by women are spent on families. Women run governments, but when they access finance, it's not okay. It's not doable. It's not easy. So
Okay.
So so give her the mic because I'm not going to argue with you. Just take the mic back.
That's the rule. After you ask the question,
By the way,
you have to give the mic.
for those of you who don't know, she used to be one of the tenants at the Greek campus, and I love her, and I've introduced her to everybody I know from Forbes all the way, whatever, and she's one of the most passionate people, and she's passionate to the point of driving me crazy, okay? But I love her because of the passion, because she is exactly what I was talking about when I was answering your question, the passion, right? She will have lived her life with that passion that you all heard the voice. So women, can I just comment on VC funding? Do you mind if I restrict it to that? Okay, VC funding is biased against women, not intentionally, because the people started it are guys, and then they have their network of guys and the people they know, and so there's a bias pre-existing, okay? And that is not just in VC, but in most systems, right? So I acknowledge your point 100%. When you get to the side where you have to fund, the people that have been mentored and pushed to be CEOs and bring companies are mostly guys. And on the responsibility side, we have a responsibility to fund companies to make a return for the investors. So the last 5, 8 companies that have come to pitch to us have been led by men. We solve, one problem. I know I sent you the article that I wrote about tech and how it can change women's lives and all that. But it's, and I got some help here on that. The system is currently rigged. Okay? And I didn't say this in the article, but the biggest limiting factor for women is the guys in their lives, their dad, their husband, their brother, whatever, right? Educate those guys and they get out of the way, and the women beat them anyway by themselves, right? The girls are smarter. Most of the time, the girls are smarter. Their limiting factor is the guys in their life, right? So guys are the glass ceiling for the women. So I don't know how we fix the problem. I acknowledge there's a problem. I acknowledge there's an issue, right? Most of the smart people we interview and that we've hired are women. I think more than half our staff are women, half are like our whole investment team, right? They're just smarter. So I don't know how to balance that other than maybe time will solve that as they grow to take my place and the partner's place, and they're the ones who run the funds in 10 years, right? And then they have a network of young female entrepreneurs that they then mentor and help and fund, okay? But the quality of in a gender neutral environment like our accelerator, the percentage of women CEOs is about the same as anywhere else in the world. So I don't think I answered your question, but I give you my honest opinion on the issue.
I do on this question of time. So for the last 6 years, I was teaching in New York before I came here to Egypt. And if anyone had asked me to name the top 10 students that I had any of those 6 years, 8 or 9 each year would be the women in my classes. So I do think that it's going to, as those women move into the workforce, go to graduate and professional school, et cetera, at least in the US, with those women I was teaching, that change is going to come, and it's going to come fast. There's going to be a retirement of men, and then it's going to change like that, and people are going to wonder, well, where did this come from? How did this happen? But it's coming. There's no doubt in my mind that it's coming. And too slowly, way too slowly, but it's coming. and the change will happen quickly when it finally does. We have time for one more question.
One more.
And so here we go. You get to wrap it up. So choose well.
This guy's had his hand up.
Oh, we have two more questions.
This guy here.
All right.
Yeah, you go ahead and this guy here.
You still choose well, though. Please, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Thomas. I'm South Sudanese. Sir, you ever mentioned that in your entrepreneurial life, you work in a hospital, in a park, in a call center, gas stations, and in the end become an entrepreneur. I was wondering, how did you find out that you were meant to be an entrepreneur? In simple, how did you find your purpose in life?
I made a conscious decision that I didn't want to work for anybody and that I did not want to get a paycheck. Okay? That was a decision I made, and I don't recommend that to anybody because it was not fun. But it was liberating. All right? So it's a personal choice. It's not a choice I ever advise anybody to do. And it was a roller coaster. And we went on a roller coaster. My wife, she put up with me, but this is a life choice. So it's the same as being an entrepreneur. I chose to, maybe I have been entrepreneurial. I don't think of myself as an entrepreneur. And maybe that's the reason that I had so much fun at it and I succeeded at it, because I didn't put myself in the label and didn't try and fit a role or a definition. I just did what I did. And all the promotion of the entrepreneurship, and everybody in my generation wants all of the young generation to be entrepreneurs to solve the problem that my generation screwed up, right? You guys solve all the social problems that our generation didn't really fix very well. That's not really a good formula, because it's too much of a burden. And it should be, here's the tools, you guys are liberated, go create, discover, come up with new business opportunities, right? And that is really what my generation should give to your generation, is the tools, whether knowledge, academics, financing, support, to go out and discover new opportunities and find new business ideas, economic ideas, social improvement ideas, solutions to social problems that we didn't think of or didn't implement.
Thank you.
All right, so with those, Ahmed, who had the last question that you said? Hand up.
Hena, wara. The guy in the sweatshirt. Okay. Oh. I can't say no to you. No, you go ahead.
Well, I have a question about the discovery of natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. Should there be a regional network that uses and utilizes this gas? And if so, how would that be set up, or why would that be a good idea? And or should there not be such a network? And in terms of your understanding of business and entrepreneurship, is there an effective model that can be utilized to look at this possible new windfall of funds?
I don't know, I'd say that question is probably above my pay grade, all right? But I would tell you, in the ideal scenario, we wouldn't burn gas, right? So it would be irrelevant, all of this stuff. And we'd have these massive solar farms like we're doing. And by the way, if any of you have seen Bill Gates has this new thing that he funded, this concentrator or whatever, that was actually, I started my first incubator in Pasadena in 1998, and the guy started 6 months before me, is the guy who discovered that. His name is Bill Gross, his place called Idea Lab, and Bill Gates funded him. And this whole idea, I don't know if any of you have seen this, concentrating solar power to melt steel, right? Well, he started because these photovoltaic panels were so damn expensive that he put mirrors to concentrate extra light on the very expensive panels that were this big, right? He was really stupid back then. He never thought of the idea of these solar panels become so damn cheap that you can just put hundreds of them, right? He built a whole solar concentrator to concentrate all the solar power on this one little panel, because that was the most expensive component at the time. Well, that idea failed. And 9 years later, he said, well, I know how to concentrate solar power. We'll just use it to melt steel so we don't have to burn gas. And he's going to revolutionize industry with this new business. So, solar power, no CO2 emissions. I'm up for that.
Okay.
Last question, sir. Yes.
As this is the last one, I want to discuss something with you, please, if you allow. It's a different topic about these topics, okay? The models in AUC is really great and strong to improve our language as Egyptian, okay? But there is a lot of students in level 1 can't start to improve themselves because there is many things for beginners doesn't exist. Like from the beginnings, how to pronounce the letters, verb to be, verb to have, and يعني بناء على كده.
Yeah, so how can we provide courses that really start people from the beginning in languages?
They can't begin to improve themselves because they don't know these small topics. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And out in Egypt, there's a lot of courses out AUC. There is level under level 1 to teaches the how to pronounce letters, the grammars, something like that. Okay, but here in AUC, when I asked for that, they told me it's a system here. We deal with you like you know many things after you sign here.
Okay, I think I understand your question, and the first part of my answer would be a confession that I'm only in my 3rd month in the job, and so I clearly need to learn more about the levels that we offer, and I will be taking your question up. It's one of the reasons that I like to talk to people. I like to hear what's going on. I like to hear what people's reactions are to things. And I will either, after this, you can take my card and I will either find out where things really are, and maybe you got wrong information, or if in fact what you're saying is true, then we need to rethink what we do. And I can tell you that I'm a big believer in people learning languages, not just English. And although we do teach a lot of English at AUC, but this idea that you have to start somewhere, no matter what age you are, you have to learn the basics of any topic, including a language, is something that we should be involved in. I have my own personal experience in doing that. My daughter, when she was a university student, she really started studying Arabic late, and she found a program at the American University of Beirut, if I'm allowed to talk about our other institution in the region, and they had an absolute beginner course, an intensive beginner course, and it was very difficult for her at first, but absolutely essential. So if there's something missing in our offerings, and if there's something that we ought to be providing, not just because there's a marketplace for it, but because there's a need for it, I want to look into that. So I'm telling you, I will do that, and we can be in touch, and we'll figure out the answer to this question. Please.
Before you close, are you going to close now?
Yes, but okay. Please, you get the last word before I.
Can you invest some of your funds in Egypt to open and establish a new university that teaches all American research labs, as in Pasadena, FinTech, as you see? We would like some people, they have money here to invest in education.
If I do an online university?
New labs and look for their money. We wanted them also to open. We would like to see a new university in Alexandria or in Fayoum or in Asyut with American education. This is one of my questions. Second, do you achieve all the
So listen, but only one question. Excuse me. We have to wrap up. We're running out of time. Thank you.
So, I have been thinking for a while about a university project, okay, but to do an online-only university and to offer it to basically for free, and you only pay to be tested and get a certificate. Although I'm not really big on certificates, right? You know, there's a joke where like الشعب المصري بيتجوز بالشهادة ويشتغل بالحب, right? So we need to flip that, right? We need to work with our degrees and get degrees that only get us to work, right? And keep the other stuff at home. No, I actually would just like to. The thing I would like to leave everybody here with is one small thought. Help somebody every day, one small thing. You never know, in 10, 20 years I might call and thank you. All right? That's it. That's one lesson.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. And please do come back to our other lectures. You can find us online. You can find us in many places, but we'll be having more. So have a good evening.